Just before losing consciousness, the girl whispered faintly through her cracked lips, "My name is Terry Jo Duperrault," and then she passed out. The second mate of the Greek freighter Captain Theo couldn't believe his eyes on the morning of November 16, 1961, when he saw, just a few meters from the ship, a small white raft, and on it, a girl, tilting her head up and looking straight at him, trying weakly to wave. Noticing sharks circling nearby, the crew shouted to the child not to jump into the water. Nicholas Bakidakis rushed to the wheelhouse and shouted, "Full stop!" The girl and her raft were brought aboard and carried to a cabin. The cork raft was tiny, only about 60 centimeters by 1.5 meters. How had such a small girl ended up on such a raft? The captain urgently telegraphed the mainland. Child found in Northwest Providence Channel, 120 miles from Miami. Girl, blonde, brown eyes, on small white raft, sunburned, dehydrated, in shock, immediate evacuation needed. Gradually, the girl began to recover. She was wearing a white shirt and pink pajama pants. She was given a little water and orange juice. Her body was gently wiped with damp towels to remove salt, and Vaseline was applied to her lips. Terry was flown by rescue helicopter to Miami and admitted to the Hospital of Mercy. Doctors diagnosed her with third-degree sunburn and dehydration, but there was no immediate threat to her life. This story had begun as a joyful, long-awaited adventure. A successful 40-year-old ophthalmologist, Arthur Duperrault, decided to surprise his wife and children with a yacht trip. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, Arthur was respected and admired, not just as an excellent doctor, but as a genuinely good person and a model family man. His wife, Jean, was 2 years younger, 38, and they had 3 children, their 14-year-old son, Brian, and 2 daughters, 11-year-old Terry Jo and 7-year-old Renee. In early November, when the autumn rains began to fall, the Duperrault family headed to the airport. Just a few hours later, they were in sunny Miami. The yacht had been chosen and chartered in advance. In Fort Lauderdale, Harold Pegg, the owner of the Bluebelle, was waiting to meet them. During the war, Arthur Duperrault had served in the Pacific and had completely fallen in love with the sea. It had been his dream for years. Now he could finally afford to buy a yacht, and this cruise was meant to be a trial run. Smiling warmly, Harold Pegg welcomed the family.
Hello, hello. I hope the trip wasn't too tiring. Everything's ready.
The skipper, an old sea dog, is eager to meet you. Come, I'll introduce you. You'll like him, yachtsman, war hero, and a pilot. The beautiful yacht stunned the family with its elegance. Standing on deck was the hired captain, with a rugged, open face, a powerful build, and wind-tousled hair. Mr. Pegg was the first to step aboard.
Here he is. Meet your captain.
The captain extended his hand to Arthur.
Julian Harvey. Make yourselves at home. We've got an exciting week ahead of us.
The men exchanged a firm handshake. A short distance away stood a young woman, to whom Harvey waved.
This is my wife, Mary.
Mrs. Harvey smiled warmly.
Just call me Mary. Your cabins are all ready. I'm in charge of the cooking, by the way, so I'm happy to hear any dinner requests.
The children ran off excitedly to explore the yacht. Arthur gently wrapped his arm around Jean. Well, what do you think, darling? I'm thrilled. The Bahamas, here we come. Yes, this kind of vacation only happens once in a lifetime. And if we like it, we could buy our own yacht. Agreed? Absolutely. On November 8th, 1961, the yacht set sail. The sun gleamed on the polished railings of the beautiful Bluebelle. Mary was busy preparing dinner, the children laughed and played on deck, and the Duperrault couple lounged in deck chairs, sipping cocktails. Life was perfect. The voyage was dotted with stops along the way. They sunbathed, swam among coral reefs, caught fish. Several serene, blissful days passed. On November 13, 1961, a watch officer aboard a tanker en route to Puerto Rico spotted a small boat adrift in the ocean. Inside the boat was a man, frantically waving his arms and shouting, "Help!" It was Julian Harvey. There was also a small girl in the boat, and she was dead. The yacht sank. "I'm the only survivor," Harvey said, teeth chattering as he was brought aboard. Soon, a Coast Guard cutter arrived at the tanker. Julian Harvey was transferred to it and taken to Miami, where he recounted what had allegedly happened aboard the Bluebelle. According to his version of events, during the night of November 13th, a violent squall brought down the mainmast. Its shattered remains punched through the cabin roof, rupturing a gas line in the galley and damaging the electrical wiring. A fire broke out. Julian said he rushed to wake everyone. The passengers came running up to the deck. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and began battling the flames. But then a gas cylinder exploded. The blast tore a hole in the side of the yacht. The Bluebelle began sinking rapidly. Harvey said he rushed to the lifeboat and prepared to lower it into the water. But panic had already set in. Despite his calls to stay calm, the terrified passengers jumped overboard. The yacht capsized, and the remains of the broken mast struck those struggling in the water. He claimed he tried to save 7-year-old Renee, but she drowned. Soon, it became clear. Julian Harvey was the sole survivor. At the police station, his story was carefully listened to. There were no other witnesses, and it seemed there wouldn't be, so authorities had little choice but to take Mr. Harvey at his word. Still, they decided to question him again. During the second interrogation, Harvey repeated everything word for word, but now inconsistencies began to emerge. The investigator sent a request to meteorologists. The response came back. In the specified area on November 12 to the 13th, there were no weather conditions strong enough to produce a squall capable of toppling a mast. A medical examination of Mr. Harvey revealed no burns or injuries that would indicate a desperate struggle with fire. Another inquiry confirmed that in the waters on the night of November 13, none of the passing ships, and this was a fairly busy area, reported seeing a yacht engulfed in flames. Another strange detail stood out. Harvey's lifeboat was fully stocked with survival supplies, drinking water, food, and essential items, as if someone had prepared for the escape in advance. And finally, maybe it was just the investigator's personal impression, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Julian Harvey was too calm for a man who had just lost his young wife and failed to save the family entrusted to his care. They needed to thoroughly dig into his background. Harvey remained calm and focused during subsequent interrogations. During one of the questioning sessions, investigator Ernest Murdoch's superior came in and said, "They found a girl from the Duperrault family from the Bluebelle, alive." Julian Harvey's face changed, but a moment later, he put on the most carefree expression and said, "Well, that's good news." Harvey was given a date for his next interrogation and then released. Julian went outside and headed to the Sandman Motel, where he rented a room under the false name John Monroe. He prepared for the worst. He wrote a note to a friend asking him to take care of his 14-year-old son, Lance. On a sheet of the motel notepad, Harvey wrote, "I have failed. I'm fed up with my life, and I don't know what to do with it. I can't go on. I'm leaving. Bury me at sea." After that, he left a $10 tip for the maid and took his own life in the bathroom. His body was found a few hours later. The police who arrived at the scene already knew a lot about Julian Harvey. So, Mr. Harvey, the son of a Broadway Corrine, a single mother who eventually married her impresario, his stepfather turned out to be a generous and magnanimous man. For example, on Julian's 10th birthday, he gave his stepson a real sailboat. From his teenage years, the young man began bodybuilding and literally sculpted his body. Julian was proud of his well-defined muscles and even worked as a model. When World War II broke out, 24-year-old Harvey enrolled in aviation school. As a bomber pilot, he took part in dozens of combat missions and was awarded multiple times by the end of the war. He was very popular with women. Before Mary, he had been married 5 times. All 5 marriages were short-lived, and one ended under very strange circumstances. In April 1949, Harvey was returning home from the movies. In the car he was driving were his wife, Joanna, and his mother-in-law. As they were crossing a bridge, the car crashed into the railing and fell into the water. Both women drowned while Harvey, according to his own account, opened the door at the last moment and got out. However, a diver who examined the car found that the car doors were locked and only the driver's side window was rolled down. It appeared that Harvey saved himself without even attempting to rescue his companions. He was paid an insurance settlement after his wife's death. A few months later, Harvey remarried and was almost immediately sent to Korea. There, he flew more than 100 combat missions. When he returned to the States in 1953, he got divorced and left the Army. Another marriage did not improve his financial situation, and he took a job as a yacht captain. So what did the 11-year-old surviving girl say? That ill-fated evening, she went to her cabin at 9 p.m. and, exhausted from the day, fell into a deep sleep. Her parents and her brother and sister were on the deck. Julian and his wife Mary were there as well. Terry suddenly woke up to a terrible noise and a piercing scream. Her brother Brian was screaming, "Dad, Dad." The girl quietly slipped out of the cabin, went up to the deck, and went to the direction of the mess. There she saw the bodies of her brother and mother lying in the blood. Not far away lay Mary. The blood was everywhere. Terry covered her mouth with her hand just not to scream. Horror gripped the girl and he saved. From that moment on, Terry acted as if she was deprived of emotions and nerves. Even tears were not. Suddenly, out of the darkness, Harvey appeared and shouted, "Get back to your cabin!" Terry ran to her room and curled up in the corner. Soon, water began seeping into the cabin. She opened the door and saw the water rising. Already knee-deep, she waded toward the ladder. There she saw Harvey lowering a lifeboat into the sea. Moments later, he was rowing away from the sinking yacht. Terry remembered a small cork float stored on the cabin roof. She and her brother and sister used to play with it, collecting seashells during their swims. She quickly untied it, freed the float, and tossed it into the water. With great difficulty, she climbed aboard. A wave from the sinking yacht crashed over her. Terry lay down on the float and stared up at the night sky. Minutes passed, then hours. She had no idea how long she'd drift or whether anyone would ever come. Her clothes were soaked and she was shivering. Dawn broke, but there was nothing around, just an endless expanse of sea. Terry whispered silent prayers, sometimes dozing off. She would awaken when some fish tried nibbling at her dangling foot. Then she would jerk it back and curl into a ball. By day, the sun's rays burned her skin and eyes. Her body was covered in blisters. 3.5 days passed. No water, no food, nowhere to shelter. She began to see strange visions and hallucinations set in. And then, miraculously, she was found. It turned out that shortly before the voyage, Harvey had taken out a $20,000 life insurance policy on his wife Mary. He had planned to kill her for the money. Most likely, Mary found out about his intentions and confided in the Duperraults. She may have even told her husband she knew everything and that she would report him to the police once they returned to shore. Harvey panicked and attacked his wife. Mary's screams probably drew Arthur and John Duperrault, and Harvey killed them too, right in front of her. There was no squall, no fire, no fallen mast. As one Coast Guard official would later describe it, it was a mass murder committed by a man who had lost his mind. Losing control and desperate to erase all witnesses, Harvey murdered the entire Duperrault family, except for Terry. Why did he spare her? Perhaps he thought she would go down with the yacht. We'll never know for sure. In her testimony, Terry Jo was firm. The mast remained intact. There was no fire aboard. The sea was calm leading up to the sinking. Later, she was told that Julian Harvey had been rescued 3 days before she was found, on a life raft alongside the dead body of her little sister Renee. Her parents' bodies, her brother, and Mary Harvey were all lost at sea. By late November 1961, Terry Jo's condition improved. She was discharged from the hospital and returned home to Green Bay. She was adopted by her father's sister. The aunt who adopted Terry never brought up the tragedy and never asked her for details. She believed it was better to forget it all, as if nothing had ever happened. Everyone around me was silent about it, Terry recalled years later. At age 12, she had changed the spelling of her name to Terry. And I couldn't talk about it either. A psychiatrist tried to help, but he never got to the root of the problem. Maybe it would have been better to tell everything, to drive out the torment. But it took 49 years for Terry Duperrault to find the strength to speak. By that time, she had been through 4 failed marriages and had 3 children. She wrote a book titled Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, co-authored with psychologist Richard Logan, in which she recounted what happened to her during those terrifying days that took away her parents, brother, and sister,